Welcome back to Das Wagen Garage. Now, as I've mentioned in the last video, that the car is actually being taken to the shop. It is actually not here. It would be physically standing right here if it was still with us right now. But it is technically, as of today, it is currently in the shop. When it'll come back, that is still awaiting unknown. However, in that meantime, I was actually able to put together the engine. It is together, mostly. Not technically. The engine is together, but it is not torqued down to spec. It is not sealed up with the right gaskets, except for the head gasket is on. And there's still some hardware to replace, such as the connecting rod bolts, the main bearing cap bolts, and some of the head bolt, or actually the head bolt hardware. I just put some stuff on, and even the timing chain cover, those pieces don't have all the hardware on it, simply because I do not have all the pieces needed for this engine. I do not have the valve cover, billeted cover. I don't have the vacuum delete pump cover. There's additional pieces from the kit that I'm looking forward to that I don't have. They're going through some changes right now, and what I know is that that kit is on, well, let's just say it's on back order for now until they either change some things, and I might just pre-order some additional parts or some other parts instead of things from the kit. But there's too much from that kit that I need to put this together for me to single source out a lot of the other parts. So the engine is going to be sitting on hold for now. Today, we are actually talking about suspension, changing the suspensions, the fixes that need to be made in order for the car, in order for me to run coilovers. Now, the kit, the same guys that are doing the swap with this engine into the Porsche, are also doing some modifications for theirs, so that they can actually run coilovers. Now, the brand do I go with coilovers? There's one or two that I've seen, but in order for us to get to that point, we need to make some modifications. Some of those modifications include having the car back, which right now I don't have. However, I do have the pieces that are going to be going onto the car. So until I get the car back, some of these clips are going to be prior to that car. So, having mentioned in my other videos, I actually went over to the 944 barn, hosted by the man, the myth, the legend, Elliot himself. If you ever see this, Elliot, thank you again. He was able to supply me with replacement parts. Now, I already had the turbo arms. They're from the early models of the 944 up until 85, and especially all the base models. They had a steel trailing arm. The turbo models had aluminum. This doesn't look like aluminum, but it's cast aluminum. So the turbo models had aluminum arms, and the turbo models benefited doing this. They can run coilovers, especially with these being lighter than the seal arms. But the difference about that is that can't run the factory spring plates from the base model to the turbo model. So this is going to be replacing the existing arms on spring plates on the car that we have currently. What does need to be taken off are these bushings here. These are all factory rubber bushings. They're degrading. What I've got in replacement is some good polyurethane bushings, particularly from PowerFlex. Fortunately, they had these bushings, especially for the rear, for the turbo models. They do have stuff for the front, but all I needed right now was for the rear. I do actually have factory control arms for the front, and I can replace those bushings. Those bushings for the control arms, I believe, are the same for the base model and the turbo. What is different between non-turbo and the turbo models is the uprights are different for the control, for the coilover, because that mounting bracket is different. If you've ever seen Ludwig's Garage, apologize if I mispronounced that. But if you've seen Ludwig's Garage on his video of him putting coilovers in the 944, they had to make some modifications to their coilovers just in order for those to go in. Simply of grinding off some of the material from the bracket, which was not choice, but they had to do it in order to make it work. So because I'm not actually having to deal with that and actually going forward with replacing the whole knuckle and the coilover itself, we're going to be replacing the bushings, because these are simply not going to do. Now, the benefit of I actually get to have is I get to work on these without them being on the car. These are actually going to be the replacement, as I mentioned, and the unfortunate thing is these bushings are 40 years old, and they are old rubber. I can feel them crunch a bit, and they've been molded on there. These are from the factory, which also doesn't help that they've been set in place and haven't been touched for, let's just call it eons. It's too damn long. Now, I have actually already tried to work on removing these bushings. It's a pain. And this is already just from a heat gun and scraping it. This is just gonna be some time. I will actually come back to these at a later time, and at that point, I should already have them off. Whatever method I've done, I'm not going to teach you, show you. There's going to be videos for that. I might find a video and I will link it down below in the description. However, that's atrocious. I can't help that. So the unfortunate thing is having to work with these. But I do have the nice, beautiful replacements, as I mentioned. So I can't wait to get these off, put the replacements on. I might actually clean this metal up, but that actually might be it. So I'm going to do my best and take these off myself. I will probably end up taking a torch to them. So these will come back, and in fact, I will still have some work to do. I'm going to actually take apart some brake calipers. I've actually taken apart, I will be taking apart the rear calipers here. These, well, taking apart much of what I can. So we'll get into that in a second. So before I move on to the next thing, I actually did some digging, and I found out that there's a shop and there's some videos of these fully being disassembled. The issue about going through the work and disassembling these, they had trouble with it. The video that I was watching, there was 2 parts, and they were both 40 minutes long. So imagine the time of them doing the full work and editing the videos down to 40 minutes. So it's kind of unreasonable at the moment. These calipers can be split apart. I have already mentioned that these are in 2 halves. You can unbolt these and split them in half. I have known that. I've seen these type of calipers before. So that is something that can be done with these. Kind of a cool feature. But because of the nature of their work on these calipers, they were doing a full restoration of the car. That is not the case for here. What we are working with is essentially cleaning this out, making sure that it can be used again. Because the important part is that I want something to be able to use for first startup, first run, and want to make sure that the car can run and drive. Then I go back through and tweak things. The clear coat is coming off of these, and it's evident. I mean, these are aluminum blocks anyways. The clear coat's coming off of these, and in order to take these apart, there's 2 bolts here that disassemble, and the clamps or plates that are in here that hold or keep the brake pads in place, which these are actually in pretty damn good shape for brake pads. So I would reuse these. But take those out, then unbolt these, and they already had a trouble time with taking these out. They were even at the point of heating up the block with a acetylene torch, and I don't have that, much less I have as much heat as they can provide, so I don't have the same time, energy for them to use that. So for now, I'm just cleaning these out, replacing the important parts that need to be replaced, because these do need to be cleaned up and cleaned out. And once those are replaced, cleaned up, they're ready to be used when I use them. Same thing with the rest of the bushings, except for the bushings for the rear torsion bar, rear subframe / torsion bar, and for the spring plate. Those bushings will need to be the ones that have to be replaced. So but the next thing I have actually about to show you guys, which is going to be the last thing before the car shows up, and the car actually at this time frame be ready next week for me to pick up. So the next thing I'm actually going to talk about is going to be the trailing arms. I've got one set of bushings that connect from the trailing arm to the rear torsion bar, and those bushings we're about to go through, and I'm about to explain some of the needed cases for the trailing arms. So getting that to the second. So for now, these are just getting cleaned up. I think I could reuse this. These are getting replaced. Same thing with the nipples are getting replaced. So that's not bad. That should only cost me a few bucks. So with that, those are the only changes going to be happening with the calipers for now, and that's actually going to be for all 4 calipers. These are the rears. The pistons are slightly smaller in the rear. The pistons are larger in the front, from what I've found and done research. So they're only slightly different, so I'm going to keep them separated, but those are the work we're doing with the calipers for this car until they operate, run, and drive. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is actually, as I mentioned, this bushing here. This bushing will go directly to the rear trailing arm, and that's going to affect a lot of the play of the suspension from this point alone. Coilovers will be going on at some point. I do have replacement bolts for this. Trying to think where. I do have other replacement bolts that bolt the trailing arm to the frame of the car. So I have those bolts, these bolts that connect the suspension, and this has actually been partially disassembled because I already took out the bushing. It actually wasn't difficult to take out. These are actually going to be the 2 different bushings. Well, actually, this is the old bushing, compressed air into that sleeve, and this is the new one. And if you can't quite tell, there's the difference in the diameters. You can slightly see it, but for those who don't know, and even though I may not be as experienced, but I do know this and can explain this fairly reasonably. These collars, there's a collar in the center, that collar is going to be replaced as well. And the bushing itself, here's a fun little science fact, you can freeze these. You probably have heard it before for those who are mechanics, engineers, and things like that. But for those who don't know anything about this, you can freeze these or put them in the oven, however the case may be. For this, because of the diameter that we're having to get this one down to, we will be putting in a freezer, and that should help it change its rubber. This is a polyurethane, but change its properties because rubber mends when it's frozen and will shrink. So that will allow us to help press this into that same sleeve. I'm going to still have to use a bushing bearing press just to put it all through, but this is the difference. That's not too terrible. But still, that's what we're having to work with. The other thing I'm finding out not so fun is these wheel hubs are unobtainium. And as I found out, they are unobtainium. You can't find them anymore. They've stopped being made. If anything at this point, I'm just going to have a machine shop or have something machined in replica size diameter of this, but that's out of the question for what needs to be done. So I will actually have to pull this wheel hub off eventually just to clean it up, clean up the surface. And these bolts get, they're not torqued to yield, but over time they yield and the threads change. Especially with these being rusted on to where the way they are, I really should probably just take this out, clean this up, replace these bolts in general. But even with that, once I do that, I'll need to check the bearing, and then the bearing will have to be pulled out, and that's a whole nother story with replacing. So the trailing arms in general will need to be disassembled. Not in too terrible shape. I'm just going to clean this up, degrease it. And the other thing about these is this is the rear parking brake. They are both trailing arms. This parking brake section will actually come off. So I won't need this. There's a, you can see it on the inside. There is a, or if you can, there's a cable down here. This cable is still, actually, this cable down here is still connected because it goes on from this outside here. So that's no longer needed. Get rid of this crap. But that's the work that we'll have to do with these trailing arms, getting these bushes on. I will work on that with this video. If anything, it'll turn into a part 2, but that's the work so far for these. Next clip should be me pulling the car in the garage or getting the car. As I have now shown, the car is back. We are back. And thankfully, it now has a full cage. I have brought that up in my TikTok and the other YouTube shorts, but cage is installed. That means now we can really get started on a lot of the work. So everything that I have discussed in this video so far has really just been prep and kind of getting things rolling so that when I do work on the suspension, we have already started on some of those things. But before I even fully take and work on the suspension, the first thing is really going to be painting the cage. I got to paint the interior. I'll just kind of get it covered, probably, yes, primered. And actually I really should go ahead and primer and fully paint the interior now that I've got everything out. The only other thing that I will need to do before we work on the suspension is going to be dropping the suspension. The front control arms will need to be taken out. That means the coilovers will be taken out. The hubs, the front hubs are going to be taken out as well, simply because, as I mentioned, the hubs that I got are for the turbo, and what Elliot from 944 Barn has informed me is that those are not the same hubs that match up with the front of the existing hubs. So the coilovers will be changed, the front hubs will be changed. The entire rear will have to be dropped because we're already going to have to do some modifications to that anyways. So all of that, all the suspension that needs to be dropped will be dropped, and I'll be painting the underside of the car because there are some things that I do need to paint the underside of the car. And then we'll get to working on the suspension. So there's a bit of a kind of a break in working on the suspension for now, but we are rolling. We've got the car back. We're good, ready to go. And I honestly can't wait to get this thing started. But before I let you guys go, I just wanted to share in how phenomenal this cage is. This cage was built in and welded by E Street Racing, Jim Drago's shop. He didn't give me the name of his welder, but the guy is phenomenal with the Spec Miata cages. So if you have a Spec Miata cage built by ESR, East Street Racing, you're familiar with their work. The same guy did this cage. So thank you guys so much for watching this video up to this point. Leave a like and subscribe. I will have more content coming this way now that I have the car back in the garage. And yes, I've been busy. These videos come out slow. I get tied up with different things. 2 weeks ago, I was in Indy for the 6-hour Indy IMSA race. You guys would have loved it being there. If you were there, then great. You can imagine like how awesome it is going to an IMSA event. And I come home in the afternoons with only so much time to work on the car before I just tire myself out. So I'm limited to sometime in the afternoons and then weekends. But the cold seasons are coming up, and I'd rather work in the cold than any sort of heat. But the cage is here. The car is back. We're getting work started again. We're going to be getting up and rolling. Some things might take a little bit of time trying to get parts, but we're here. So I thank you again for watching up to this point. Leave a like and subscribe and follow along for more. And I'll see you guys actually on the next video for suspension work on Das Wagen Garage. See you guys.